My friends, let me tell you something. The world was shaken in Alaska, not because of earthquakes, not because of storms, but because two giants stood face to face, the United States and China. They met at the table, and instead of handshakes and friendly talks, there were clashes of words, power, and pride. That meeting showed us all one thing: the world has entered a new era. The old order is no longer guaranteed. When you think about moments in history that send a shockwave around the world, they are not always wars or revolutions. Sometimes it is a meeting, a conversation, a single event that shows us the balance of power is changing right before our eyes. The Alaska meeting between the United States and China was exactly that. It wasn't just diplomats sitting at a table. It was the stage where the world saw two superpowers collide, and make no mistake, everybody was watching. The U.S. went into that meeting expecting to lead, as it always has for decades. America has been used to setting the tone, giving the rules, and others following. But this time, China came in with a new attitude. They did not sit quietly. They did not accept lectures. They looked the Americans in the eyes and said, "We are not here to be told what to do." That moment shocked the world. Why? Because it showed us that the old order, the one where the United States stood unchallenged, is being tested in a very open, public way. Now think about this. For years, the competition between the US and China was quiet. It was in trade, in technology, and influence. But Alaska was the moment when the mask came off. It was no longer polite diplomacy, it was confrontation, and the world felt it like a jolt of electricity. Newspapers, leaders, analysts, everybody understood immediately. The game had changed, and here's why it matters. When a superpower like America gets pushed back in such a dramatic way, it tells the world that we are not living in the same reality as before. Other nations begin to calculate differently. They start asking, if the US can be challenged like this, who else can rise? Who else can step into the arena? This is why the Alaska meeting sent shockwaves. It wasn't about agreements or policies written on paper. It was about power, pride, and perception. And in geopolitics, perception is everything. Let me tell you something I learned in bodybuilding. When you step on stage, it's not just about your muscles. It's about presence. It's about how the audience sees you, how confident you look, how unshakable you appear. That is exactly what happened in Alaska. The world didn't just hear words. They saw body language, tone, and confidence. China walked onto that stage like a competitor no longer willing to play second place. And America realized, maybe for the first time, that its dominance would not go unquestioned anymore. So why is this educational? Because it shows us how moments of confrontation define history. It shows us how power is not only in weapons or economies, but in the courage to stand tall. Alaska was not just a meeting. It was a message to the entire planet. The world order is shifting. And once that shift begins, nothing goes back to the way it was. For decades, the United States has been the champion of the world stage. After World War II, it wasn't just another country. It became the symbol of power, freedom, and leadership. Nations looked to America not only for military protection, but also for economic opportunity and technological progress. The U.S. was like the strongest man in the gym. Everyone respected it. Everyone wanted to train with it. And nobody dared to challenge it openly. But here's the reality. Even the strongest man must keep training, or else someone else will catch up. And that is exactly what America is facing right now, a struggle to hold on to the dominance it once enjoyed without question. The Alaska meeting revealed something important. For the first time in years, the U.S. wasn't the one setting the pace. It was being pushed, interrupted, and challenged by China in full public view. This was shocking for many Americans because they are used to being in control. But history tells us this is natural. Empires rise, and then they must fight to maintain their position. The Roman Empire had to fight, the British Empire had to fight, and now America faces the same challenge. Dominance is never permanent. It is something you must earn every single day. Think about this like bodybuilding. When you win Mr. Olympia, you don't stop training. You don't say, "I am the champion, now I can relax." No! That is when the pressure becomes even greater, because the world is watching, and there are hundreds of hungry competitors who want to take your place. That's how it is with the U.S. The country has been the champion for decades, but now it is facing competitors who are bigger, stronger, and more ambitious than ever before. And if America doesn't keep working, keep innovating, and keep proving its strength, it risks losing the very dominance that made it great. The struggle for dominance is not just about weapons or armies. It's about economics, technology, culture, and even ideas. The U.S. built its power not only by force, but by being the land of opportunity, by creating Silicon Valley, by leading in science and education, and by projecting confidence to the world. But now, as other nations grow stronger, America has to relearn what made it powerful in the first place. It must focus on discipline, innovation, and unity, not division. Because here's the truth, you can't hold dominance by resting on your past victories. You can only hold it by earning new ones. So the lesson for all of us is this: dominance, whether in life, in sports, or in geopolitics, is never given. It is maintained through hard work, resilience, and constant evolution. America is struggling now because it is learning that the fight never ends. And that's a reminder to all of us: if you want to stay on top, you have to train harder, think smarter, and never let your guard down. What shocked the world most about the Alaska meeting was not that the US and China had disagreements. Everyone already knew that. The shock was in how China responded. For decades, when the US called the shots, China played a quieter game. It focused on growth, building its economy, and keeping a low profile. But in Alaska, that mask came off. China didn't just answer America, it pushed back boldly, publicly, and unapologetically. It was as if a competitor who once stood in the background suddenly walked to the front of the stage and said, "I am here, and I will not be ignored." This pushback wasn't just about pride, it was about power. China has been growing for decades, building factories, dominating trade, investing in infrastructure, and expanding its influence across Asia, Africa, and beyond. The Alaska meeting was the moment it decided to show the world that it is no longer just a rising power, it is a challenger ready to stand toe-to-toe with America. And the way it did this shocked diplomats and leaders worldwide. China openly criticized US policies, called out its weaknesses, and refused to accept the old script where America speaks and everyone else listens. Now, whether you agree or disagree with China's politics, you cannot ignore the strategy. This boldness was calculated. It was meant to show strength, confidence, and defiance. Because in global politics, perception is half the battle. When you look unshaken, when you speak with authority, you send a message not only to your rival, but also to everyone else watching. And that's exactly what China did in Alaska. It sent a message to the world that it would not play second place anymore. This is where the lesson comes in. In life, many people are underestimated. They stay quiet, they work in the background, they grow stronger without drawing attention. But one day, if they have the courage, they step forward and claim their place. That takes boldness, that takes confidence, that takes years of preparation. China's pushback was not random, it was built on decades of preparation, and that's why it hit so hard. I'll tell you something from bodybuilding. When I first came to America, people saw me as just a foreign guy with a funny accent and big muscles. They didn't expect me to rise beyond that, but I had a plan. I worked, I trained, I studied, I prepared. And when I stepped on the stage, I didn't come to stand in the background. I came to win. And when I spoke, even with my accent, I spoke with confidence. That is what made the difference. Confidence backed by preparation is unstoppable. That's what the Alaska meeting showed the world. China's bold pushback was not just about the present, it was about signaling the future. It showed that the world order will not be the same anymore. And the lesson for all of us is simple: when your moment comes, don't hesitate. Step forward with courage, because the world respects boldness backed by strength. When giants clash, there is always space for another force to rise. That is exactly the opportunity India found after the Alaska meeting. While the United States and China stood locked in confrontation, the world began to look around and ask who else can bring stability, who else can carry influence without being dragged into the fight, and all eyes turned toward India. This was not an accident. It was the result of decades of preparation, quiet building, and steady growth. India has always been a nation with massive potential, more than 1 billion people, one of the world's fastest growing economies, a proud democratic system, and a culture of resilience. But for many years, its role in global politics was more restrained, more cautious. The Alaska meeting changed that, because it showed the world that the old balance between the US and China could no longer hold the same way. That created a window, an opening for India to step forward as a decisive player. This opportunity is about more than power. It is about timing. When two powers are locked in competition, they often neglect relationships with others. That is where India has been smart. It has strengthened ties with the US through defense and technology cooperation. It has also kept economic links with China because it understands the importance of trade. It plays a balanced game. And in a world shaken by the Alaska confrontation, this balance is exactly what makes India attractive to others. Nations in Asia, in Europe, and beyond want a partner who is strong but not reckless, independent but cooperative. India can fill that role. Think about this like training. When two massive bodybuilders are locked in rivalry, people don't always want to get caught in the middle of their fight. Instead, they start looking for the athlete who has balanced strength, control, and discipline. India on the global stage is becoming that athlete. It doesn't need to throw wild punches to prove itself. It just needs to keep showing consistent growth, building alliances, and projecting confidence. That's how you step into the spotlight when the giants are distracted. The key lesson here is that opportunity often comes not when everything is calm, but when there is chaos. The Alaska meeting showed the cracks in the US-China rivalry, and India saw the chance to move from being a secondary player to being one of the central powers shaping the future. This is not just about politics, it's about vision. A nation, like a person, must recognize the moment when the door opens. And when it opens, you don't wait. You walk through it with confidence. India's window of opportunity is open right now. The world is shifting and balance is needed. If India continues with discipline, unity, and courage, it will not only rise, it will lead. And that is the true power of strategy, knowing when to step forward and having the strength to seize the moment. One of the smartest moves India has made in recent years is understanding the balance between neutrality and alignment. This is a power that is often overlooked. People think strength only comes from choosing sides, from being aggressive, from standing in one camp or the other. But real strength, the kind that lasts, often comes from knowing when to stay neutral and when to align. India has mastered this balance, and that is why its influence is growing at a time when others are clashing. Look at the Alaska meeting. The US and China showed the world they were ready to fight for dominance. Most countries would feel forced to pick a side, either stand with America or risk angering China. But India has been smart. It has built partnerships with the US in technology, defense, and energy. At the same time, it has not burned bridges with China because it understands geography and economics cannot be ignored. This balance gives India flexibility. It can move forward with whoever serves its long-term vision without locking itself into one rigid position. This is not weakness, this is strategy. Neutrality does not mean silence, it means patience, calculation, and timing. And alignment does not mean blind loyalty, it means building alliances that make you stronger without losing your independence. That is exactly what India has been doing. It works with America through the Quad, strengthening security in the Indo-Pacific. It builds trade relations with Europe, Japan, and Southeast Asia. It keeps dialogue open with Russia, even when the West pulls back. This is not confusion, it is smart positioning. It gives India options, and in a world of uncertainty, options are power. Let me tell you something from my bodybuilding career. When I was training for competitions, I didn't just copy one champion's routine. I learned from many different people. I took Franco Columbu's advice on strength. I studied Reg Park's discipline. I learned posing techniques from others. I aligned myself with whoever could help me grow, but I never lost my own identity. That is how I became the best. That is exactly what India is doing on the world stage. It takes strength from partnerships, but it never loses its independence. The Alaska meeting proved why this strategy works. When two giants lock horns, the pressure on the rest of the world is enormous. But India, by balancing neutrality with alignment, can avoid being trapped. It can benefit from both sides while building its own leadership position. That is the definition of playing smart. It is like in chess. You don't throw every piece into battle at once. You keep your king safe, you position your pieces, and you strike when the time is right. The lesson for individuals is clear. You don't have to follow one path blindly. You don't have to copy one person or one idea. Learn from many, align when it benefits you, but never lose your independence. That is how you build true power. And just like India, you can rise not by choosing sides recklessly, but by mastering the balance between neutrality and alignment. The real value of what happened in Alaska is not just about politics, not just about the US and China, not even only about India. The biggest value is in the lesson it gives to every single one of us, because geopolitics is like life. It is a mirror. The same principles that apply to nations also apply to individuals, and if you pay attention, you can take that lesson and use it to become stronger, more confident, and unstoppable in your own journey. What do we see in the Alaska meeting? We see confrontation. We see power being tested. We see one side pushing back against the other. This is exactly what happens in life. You are going to meet people who challenge you, who underestimate you, who want to dominate you. Some will try to intimidate you with their strength, their position, or their reputation. But here's the truth. You cannot let their power make you weak. You must respond with boldness, with confidence, and with strategy, just like China did when it refused to back down. At the same time, we see America struggling to maintain dominance. This is another lesson. Even if you are on top, you cannot relax. Success is not permanent. If you stop training, if you stop learning, if you stop improving, someone else will catch up. That's why I always tell people, winning is not the end of the journey. It is just the beginning of a harder fight. The higher you rise, the more discipline you need to stay there. Nations learn this, and individuals must learn it too. Then we look at India and we see the third lesson. When giants fight, opportunities open. Life is the same way. Sometimes two strong forces will clash. two businesses competing, two people fighting, two groups tearing each other down. And if you are smart, you will not get caught in their battle. You will step aside, watch, and use that moment to grow. That is how you rise when others are distracted. That is how India is using the moment to build its power. And that is how you can use challenges in your own life as opportunities. Think about it. All of us face struggles, family pressure, career competition, personal failures. These are your superpowers clashing in front of you. But instead of being afraid, you must think strategically. Where is the opening? Where is the chance for me to step forward? Where can I grow while others are fighting? This mindset will transform your life. When I came to America, people laughed at my accent. They said I would never make it in acting, in politics, or in business, but I didn't let their power intimidate me. I used every challenge as an opportunity. I trained harder, I prepared better, and I stepped into every opening with confidence. That is why I succeeded. So here's the lesson: life rewards courage, discipline, and strategy. Just like nations rise by facing pressure and seizing opportunities, you can rise by staying focused, working hard, and stepping into your moment. The Alaska meeting shook the world, but for you, it should shake your mindset. Don't wait, don't hide. Face the giants in your life, play your strategy, and rise.